Montana Territory, 1878. The vast, unforgiving expanse of the frontier stretched before Samuel Yates like a harsh promise. Boundless opportunity, paired with merciless isolation. At 25, Sam had already learned what the West taught all men eventually. That loneliness was the true currency of freedom. The golden prairie grasses swayed beneath the endless blue sky as he pushed his small herd toward the settlement of Pine Creek, his worn leather gloves gripping the reins of his dun-colored stallion. "Keep moving," he called to the cattle, his voice carried away by the wind. 6 years of working other men's ranches had finally yielded enough savings to claim his own parcel of land and start a modest herd. What he hadn't accounted for was the hollowness that accompanied his achievement. Sam's father had died with a bullet in his chest when Sam was 16, his mother following not a year later from a winter fever. The lessons had been clear. Attachments were dangerous in a land where death rode alongside every man. The frontier ain't for families, his father had told him once. It's for men willing to stand alone. Sam had taken those words and forged them into armor, convinced that survival meant isolation. Pine Creek appeared on the horizon as afternoon shadows lengthened across the land. A collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley beside the creek that gave the town its name. Sam's new property lay 10 miles northwest, but he needed supplies before heading to the stark emptiness of his homestead. As he approached the settlement, he adjusted the worn Stetson on his head and straightened his shoulders. His tall, lean frame cast a long shadow as he rode down the main street, drawing the attention of several townsfolk. Though trail-worn, Sam's square-jawed face and clear blue eyes had always drawn second glances from women in the towns he passed through. He never lingered long enough to let those glances mean anything. The mercantile store stood halfway down the street, its wide porch offering respite from the late summer sun. Sam dismounted, tethered his horse, and climbed the steps. The cool interior welcomed him as the bell above the door announced his arrival. "I will be right with you," called a female voice from behind a stack of fabric bolts. Sam nodded, even though she couldn't see him, and began mentally calculating his supply needs. Feed, ammunition, coffee, the essentials of a solitary existence. The stack of fabric shifted, and a young woman emerged, brushing a strand of chestnut-brown hair back from her face. Sam froze. Her deep green eyes met his, and something unfamiliar shifted in his chest. "Welcome to Olsen's Mercantile," she said, smoothing down her simple blue calico dress. "I am Francis, but everyone calls me Faye." She smiled, revealing a small dimple in her right cheek. At 20 years old, Faye Olsen carried herself with a quiet confidence that belied her youth. "Samuel Yates," he replied, removing his hat and holding it awkwardly before him. "Just bought the old Pearson place northwest of town." "The Pearson place?" "That has been empty since they moved back east 3 springs ago." Her eyes brightened with interest. "Will your family be joining you soon?" "No family," he said, the words familiar on his tongue. "Just me and the 30 head of cattle I brought." Something in her expression shifted, not pity, but a recognition that made Sam uncomfortable. It felt as though she could see straight through the armor he'd spent years constructing. "Well, Mr. Yates, anyone brave enough to take on that wild piece of land deserves a proper welcome to Pine Creek." She extended her hand in a gesture too forthright for most women he'd encountered. When Sam took her hand, the unexpected warmth of her skin against his calloused palm sent a current through him that was both alarming and exhilarating. He quickly withdrew, uncomfortable with the sudden awareness of his own heartbeat. "I just need supplies," he said gruffly, handing her a list he'd prepared. As Faye gathered his items, the store bell rang again, and an older man with a shock of white hair entered. "Faye, dear, your mother needs you back at the house," he said, then noticed Sam. "Oh, hello there. Oliver Olsen. I own this establishment." "Samuel Yates," Sam replied, shaking the man's hand. "Just settling in at the old Pearson place." "All by yourself?" Oliver asked, echoing his daughter's earlier question. "That's rough country for a lone man." "I prefer it that way," Sam answered reflexively. Oliver exchanged a look with his daughter that Sam couldn't interpret. "Well, you'll find Pine Creek to be a neighborly sort of place, whether you're looking for company or not." Faye finished gathering Sam's supplies. "Father, would you mind if I delivered these to Mr. Yates's homestead tomorrow? I could use the ride." and Mother has been saying I need fresh air after being cooped up in the store all week." Sam opened his mouth to decline, but Oliver spoke first. "Excellent idea. Faye knows every trail around these parts, Mr. Yates. Been riding since before she could walk properly." Before Sam could formulate a polite refusal, the arrangements were made. Faye would arrive at his property the following afternoon with the remainder of his supplies. That night, as Sam camped beneath the stars on his new land, the silence that had always been his companion suddenly felt less comforting. He tried to convince himself that the strange anticipation he felt was merely the excitement of finally having his own place. But as sleep claimed him, it was Faye's green eyes and that dimpled smile that followed him into his dreams. The next day, Sam worked from dawn, repairing the dilapidated cabin that had come with the property. The previous owners had left in haste, leaving broken furniture and a leaking roof. By midday, sweat soaked his shirt as he hammered new shingles into place. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made him pause. Shielding his eyes against the sun, he watched as Faye approached, driving a small wagon loaded with his supplies. Her hair was braided and tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, her slender frame clad in a practical riding skirt and jacket. "Your place looks like it could use a woman's touch, Mr. Yates," she called as she pulled the wagon to a stop. Sam climbed down from the roof, suddenly aware of his disheveled appearance. "It needs a lot more than that," he replied, helping her down from the wagon seat. Faye surveyed the cabin and the surrounding land with an appraising eye. "It has good bones. The creek nearby never runs dry, even in August. And the north pasture has the best grasses in the county." Surprised by her knowledge, Sam asked, "How do you know so much about this place?" "My father tried to buy it after the Pearsons left, but Mother refused to move from town." A shadow crossed her face. "We lost my brother James to a fever 2 years ago. Mother hasn't been the same since, afraid to let anyone out of her sight." The personal revelation caught Sam off guard. "I am sorry about your brother," he offered awkwardly. "Life out here takes as much as it gives," she said with a wisdom that seemed beyond her years. "But we keep going." As they unloaded the supplies, Sam found himself talking more than he had in months, describing his plans for the property, the cattle he'd purchased, the crops he hoped to plant come spring. Faye listened intently, offering practical suggestions that revealed her deep understanding of ranch life. "You should stay for supper," Sam said impulsively as the afternoon light began to fade. "As thanks for the delivery." Surprise flashed across her face, followed by a warm smile. "I would like that, Mr. Yates." "Sam," he corrected. "If you are going to eat my cooking, you might as well use my given name." Over a simple meal of beans and jerky cooked over the fire pit outside the cabin, they talked as the stars emerged above them. Faye spoke of growing up in Pine Creek, of helping her father with the mercantile, of her dreams to someday travel east to see the big cities. "What about you?" she asked. "What brings a man to stake a claim all alone in the wildest part of the territory?" The question brushed against the wall Sam had built around himself. Usually, he'd deflect with a vague answer about opportunity or independence. But something about the open night sky and Faye's attentive gaze made him speak truthfully. "My father was killed in a dispute over cattle when I was 16, shot in the back by a man he considered a friend." The words felt strange in his mouth after years of silence. "My mother followed him to the grave the next winter. I learned early that depending on others is a luxury the frontier doesn't allow." Faye was quiet for a moment. "I disagree," she finally said. "The frontier is precisely where we need each other most. No one survives out here truly alone." Her words challenged everything Sam had come to believe. Before he could respond, the distant howl of wolves reminded them both of the late hour. "I should get back before dark," Faye said, rising. "My parents will worry." Sam walked her to the wagon, an unfamiliar reluctance slowing his steps. "Thank you for bringing the supplies," he said, then added, "and for the company. Everyone needs a friendly face now and then, Sam," she replied, climbing onto the wagon seat. "Even those who think they don't." As he watched her wagon disappear down the trail, Sam was struck by the silence that settled back around him, a silence that, for the first time in years, felt oppressive rather than comforting. The weeks that followed brought an unexpected rhythm to Sam's life. Every Saturday, he found reason to visit town for supplies he didn't truly need, each trip inevitably leading him to Olsen's mercantile. Faye's bright smile began to feel like sunshine after a long winter, warming places inside him he'd thought permanently frozen. As autumn painted the countryside in rich golds and reds, Pine Creek prepared for its annual harvest festival. Sam had intended to avoid the celebration. Large gatherings had never been to his liking, but Faye's casual mention that she would be organizing the dance changed his mind. The town square was transformed for the occasion, lanterns hanging from ropes strung between buildings, tables laden with food prepared by the women of the community. Sam arrived just as dusk was falling, uncomfortably aware of his freshly shaved face and the new shirt he'd purchased for the occasion. He spotted Faye immediately, radiant in a forest green dress that matched her eyes, her chestnut hair falling in loose curls around her shoulders. She was helping a group of children with a game involving apples and water, her laughter carrying across the square. "Quite a sight, isn't she?" a voice said beside him. Oliver Olsen stood watching his daughter with obvious pride. "She certainly is," Sam agreed before he could stop himself. Oliver gave him an appraising look. "You know, young man, Faye has turned down 3 suitors in the past year. Said she was waiting for someone who could see past the pretty face to the person beneath." He paused meaningfully. Someone who needed her particular kind of strength. Before Sam could respond, Oliver clapped him on the shoulder and walked away, leaving Sam to wonder at the implication of his words. The evening progressed, and Sam found himself drawn into the community's celebration despite his usual reservations. Faye introduced him to people who welcomed him without question, treating him not as a stranger, but as a neighbor who had simply been away for a while. When the fiddle struck up a lively tune, Faye appeared at his side. "Dance with me, Sam?" she asked, her eyes bright with challenge. "I do not dance," he replied automatically. "Neither did I, until someone taught me," she countered, taking his hand. "Some things are worth learning, even if they make us uncomfortable at first." Before he knew it, Sam was in the midst of the dancers, his hands on Faye's waist as she guided him through the steps. He stumbled more than once, but her patience never wavered. By the third dance, something loosened in his chest, and he found himself laughing, a sound so foreign to his own ears that it startled him. As the music slowed to a waltz, Faye moved closer, her hand warm in his. "See? Not so terrible after all." In that moment, with firelight casting golden shadows across her face, Sam was struck by a realization that both terrified and exhilarated him. He was falling in love with Frances Olsen. The thought must have shown on his face, because her smile softened, and she reached up to touch his cheek briefly. "You look like a man who just discovered something important," she said. "Maybe I have," he answered, his voice rough with emotion. The spell was broken by a commotion at the edge of the square. A group of riders had entered the town, led by a hard-faced man with a distinctive scar running from his left eye to his jaw. The music faltered and stopped as the strangers dismounted. "Evening, folks," the scarred man called out. "Hope you don't mind us joining your little party. Been riding hard, and we could use some hospitality." The atmosphere shifted instantly from celebration to wariness. Sam felt Faye tense beside him. "That is Roscoe Jennings," she whispered. "He and his men have been causing trouble all through the territory. They were in Pine Creek last spring, left a man half dead after a dispute in the saloon." Sheriff Martin stepped forward, his hand resting on his holstpin. "You and your men are welcome to water your horses and move on, Jennings. The festival is for Pine Creek residents." Jennings' smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now that's not very neighborly, Sheriff. We've got money to spend and a thirst to quench." The tension stretched taut as a wire. Women gathered children close, and men moved subtly to place themselves between their families and the newcomers. "There's food and drink at the saloon," the sheriff said firmly. "This is a family gathering." For a moment, it seemed Jennings might challenge the directive, but he finally shrugged. "Suit yourself. Boys, looks like we're taking our business elsewhere." As his men turned toward the saloon, his gaze swept the crowd and landed on Faye. "Miss Olsen," he said with a tip of his hat. "Beautiful as ever. My offer still stands." Faye's face hardened. "And my answer remains the same, Mr. Jennings." The man's eyes narrowed, then shifted to Sam. Something like recognition flickered across his features. "Well now, what have we here? Samuel Yates, isn't it? Thought you were still down Arizona way." A cold weight settled in Sam's stomach. Of all the men he might encounter in Montana territory, Roscoe Jennings was among the worst possible. The man had ridden with the same outfit that had killed Sam's father years ago, not the shooter himself, but present for the murder. You two know each other? Faye asked, looking between them. We've crossed paths, Sam said tersely. A lifetime ago. Jennings' smile turned predatory. Interesting company you're keeping these days, Miss Olsen. You might want to ask your new friend about his time with the Collier gang before you get too close. With that parting shot, Jennings followed his men toward the saloon, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Faye turned to Sam, confusion evident in her eyes. What was he talking about, Sam? The warmth of the evening evaporated as Sam felt the stares of Pine Creek's residents. The past he'd outrun for years had finally caught up to him, threatening to destroy the fragile connections he'd begun to build. Not here, he said quietly. I will explain, but not like this. They walked in silence to the edge of town, away from curious ears. Under the branches of an old oak tree, Sam finally spoke. After my father was killed, I was angry and reckless. I fell in with some men who were tracking the Collier gang, the outlaws responsible for his death. I was 17, blinded by grief and rage. He couldn't meet her eyes as he continued. I rode with them for 8 months before I realized they were no better than the men they hunted. They used vengeance as an excuse to rob and terrorize. And Jennings? Faye asked softly. He rode with Collier back then. He wasn't the one who shot my father, but he was there. Sam finally looked at her. I left that life behind years ago, Faye. I've been trying to outrun it ever since. Why did you never tell me? Because I wanted to be the man you thought I was, he admitted. Not the angry boy who nearly became what he hated most. Faye was quiet for a long moment. The distant sounds of the festival continued, a stark contrast to the heaviness between them. My brother James, she finally said. He didn't die of fever. He was killed defending our store from robbers. I watched him die on the floor of our mercantile. Her voice was steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. I understand vengeance, Sam. I understand wanting to hurt those who hurt you. Hope flickered in Sam's chest. And you can forgive what I was? It is not what you were that matters, she replied. It is what you choose to be now. Before he could respond, shouting erupted from the direction of the saloon. Gunshots cracked through the night air, followed by the sound of breaking glass and more shouts. Stay here, Sam ordered, moving toward the commotion. Faye grabbed his arm. I am coming with you. Together they hurried toward the saloon, joining the crowd gathering outside. Sheriff Martin emerged, dragging an unconscious man by the collar. Jennings and his boys started a brawl. The sheriff explained grimly. 2 of them are locked up, but Jennings and 3 others fled. They took shots at my deputy on the way out. A cold certainty settled over Sam. Which way did they go? The sheriff pointed northwest, directly toward Sam's property. They know where I live, Sam realized aloud. Jennings is making this personal. I am sending a posse at first light, the sheriff said. Until then, everyone stays in town. Sam shook his head. My cattle are unprotected, and if they do not find me there, they might circle back to town. He looked at Faye. To anyone they think I care about. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You are going after them tonight. It wasn't a question, but he nodded anyway. I have to end this, one way or another. Then I am coming with you, she said with a determination that brooked no argument. I know those trails better than anyone, especially in the dark. It is too dangerous. No more dangerous than letting you face 4 armed men alone, she countered. My decision, Sam. Looking into her resolute face, Sam realized this was the moment his old belief system truly collapsed. The frontier wasn't about standing alone. It was about finding those rare, precious few worth standing beside, no matter the odds. They left town within the hour, Faye dressed in riding clothes borrowed from her father's store, a rifle across her lap. The moon provided enough light to follow the trail, and true to her word, Faye guided them through shortcuts that would get them to Sam's property well ahead of Jennings and his men. If they are coming for your cattle, they will approach from the south ridge, she said as they rode. There is cover there, and it overlooks the main pasture. Sam glanced at her with newfound respect. How do you know so much about tracking outlaws? After James died, I convinced Father to teach me everything he knew from his days as an army scout, she explained. Mother thought it was grief, but I needed to feel less helpless. They reached Sam's property just as false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. As predicted, there was no sign of Jennings yet. We need to get the cattle into the north pen, Sam said. It is the most defensible position. Working together, They managed to move the small herd into the protected enclosure just as the sun crested the horizon. Sam led Faye to a position overlooking both the cabin and the approach from the south ridge. "When they come," he said quietly, "I want you to stay hidden. This is between Jennings and me." Faye checked her rifle calmly. "We face this together, Sam. That is what I have been trying to tell you all along." Before he could argue further, the sound of approaching riders reached them. Jennings and 3 men appeared on the ridge exactly where Faye had predicted. They paused, surveying the property below. "Yates," Jennings called out. "I know you are down there. We have unfinished business." Sam stood, making himself visible while ensuring Faye remained concealed. "The only business between us ended years ago, Jennings." "Not from where I stand," Jennings replied. "You helped hang my brother after you left the gang. Called yourself righteous while watching him swing." The accusation hit Sam like a physical blow. It was true. He had testified against several Collier gang members, including Jennings' younger brother, after turning himself into the law in Arizona. The hangings that followed had been justice, not vengeance, but he understood the fine line between the two. "Your brother made his choices," Sam called back. "Just like you made yours when you rode with the men who murdered my father. And now you have made yours," Jennings snarled. "Getting cozy with the pretty shopkeeper. Building yourself a nice little life while my brother rots in the ground. This ends today," Sam said firmly. "One way or another." Jennings laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the valley. "You're right about that." He turned to his men. "Burn him out. Take the cattle. Anything else you find is yours." The outlaws spread out, 2 heading toward the cattle pen while Jennings and another man approached the cabin. Sam signaled to Faye, pointing to the men threatening the herd. She nodded, slipping away through the tall grass to circle behind them. Sam moved to intercept Jennings, stepping into the open with his revolver drawn. "That's far enough." Jennings stopped, a slow smile spreading across his scarred face as he drew his own weapon. "Finally showing some backbone, Yates. I'm not that scared boy anymore, Jennings. Leave now, and we all walk away from this." "Too late for walking away," Jennings replied. "Only one of us is leaving this valley alive." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Sam knew he had seconds before Jennings made his move. In the distance, he heard a rifle shot, Faye engaging the men threatening the cattle. The distraction was all Jennings needed. He fired, his bullet tearing through the flesh of Sam's left arm. Pain blazed a hot trail, but Sam maintained his grip on his revolver, returning fire as he dove for cover behind a water trough. Bullets splintered wood around him as Jennings and his companion unleashed a barrage. Sam breathed through the pain, calculating his next move. The shooting at the cattle pen had stopped. Either Faye had succeeded or been captured. The thought of the latter sent a surge of protective fury through him. Taking a chance, Sam rolled to a new position and fired twice. His second shot found its mark, dropping Jennings' companion with a cry of pain. Jennings cursed and retreated toward the cabin, using it for cover. "Not so brave when the odds even out, are you?" Sam called, trying to draw him out. "Brave enough to take what's yours before I kill you," Jennings shouted back. "Starting with that pretty girl. Heard her rifle. Won't be long before my boys bring her to me." Cold rage washed through Sam at the threat. He moved silently around the side of the cabin, using the skills he'd learned years ago on both sides of the law. Reaching the back entrance, he slipped inside. Jennings was at the front window, watching for Sam's approach from outside. He didn't hear Sam's footsteps until it was too late. "Drop the gun," Sam ordered, his revolver aimed at Jennings' back, the same way Jennings' friends had once killed Sam's father. Jennings froze, then slowly turned. Blood streaked his face from a cut above his eye, but his expression remained defiant. "Go ahead," he sneered. "Shoot me in the back. Prove you're no better than us after all." For a moment, Sam was transported back to that day as a 16-year-old boy, finding his father's body in the dust. The rage he'd carried for so many years surged within him, demanding satisfaction. Then Faye's voice came from the doorway. "Sam." Just his name, nothing more. But in it was everything: trust, hope, a future beyond this moment of vengeance. "Drop the gun, Jennings," Sam repeated. "The law will deal with you, not me." Fury twisted Jennings' features. In one desperate motion, he swung his revolver toward the doorway, toward Faye. Sam fired. The bullet struck Jennings in the chest, throwing him backward against the wall. He slid down, leaving a crimson trail on the rough wood, his eyes wide with shock. "You could have been one of us," Jennings gasped, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "One of the best." "I chose something better," Sam replied, moving to Faye's side as Jennings drew his final breath. Faye's face was smudged with dirt, and a small cut bled on her cheek, but her eyes were clear and steady. "The other two are tied up by the cattle pen," she said. "One tried to shoot me. I winged him in the shoulder." Sam pulled her into his arms, heedless of his own bleeding wound. "Are you all right?" "I am now," she answered, leaning into his embrace. They remained that way until the sheriff and his posse arrived, drawn by the sound of gunfire. The aftermath was a blur of explanations and testimonies. The surviving outlaws were taken into custody, and the sheriff commended both Sam and Faye for their bravery. "You two make quite a team," Sheriff Martin observed as he prepared to leave. Not many could have stood against Jennings and lived to tell about it. As the posse departed with their prisoners, Sam and Faye were left alone once more on the property that had been meant for a solitary existence, but now felt like the beginning of something entirely different. Sam's arm had been bandaged, the bullet having passed cleanly through muscle without hitting bone. They sat on the porch steps as evening painted the sky in lavender and gold, the day's violence already beginning to feel distant. "What happens now?" Faye asked softly. Sam looked out at the land he'd claimed, the cattle grazing peacefully, the cabin that needed a woman's touch just as she'd observed that first day. Most of all, he looked at Faye, whose courage and faith had shown him that what he'd thought he wanted, isolation, independence, was nothing compared to what he truly needed. "I spent years believing the frontier was no place for love," he said, taking her hand in his. "That survival meant standing alone. But today proved what you've been telling me all along. No one survives out here truly alone." Faye's fingers tightened around his. "And now I know what I want and what I need are the same thing." He turned to face her fully. "You, Faye, a life built together, right here. If you'll have me." The smile that bloomed across her face was like sunrise after the longest night. "I knew from the moment you walked into our store that you were a man worth waiting for, Samuel Yates. Even if you didn't know it yourself yet." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sam kissed Faye, not a kiss of desperate passion or fleeting desire, but a promise of all the days to come. Days they would face together, no matter what the frontier demanded of them. Spring arrived on the Yates homestead with a riot of wildflowers and new life. The cabin had been transformed over the winter months, with Faye's touches evident in every corner. Curtains at the windows, a garden taking shape beside the house, the sound of her laughter filling spaces that had once known only silence. Their wedding had been a town-wide celebration, Pine Creek turning out in full force to witness the union of the solitary rancher and the mercantile daughter. Oliver had walked Faye down the aisle with tears in his eyes, while her mother watched with a smile that had grown stronger in recent months. Now, as Sam stood on the porch of their home watching Faye hang laundry in the May sunshine, her stomach just beginning to round with their first child, he marveled at how completely his world had changed. "What are you thinking about, husband?" Faye called, noticing his gaze. Sam walked to her, placing his hand gently on the swell of their growing child. "I am thinking that my father was wrong," he said. "The frontier isn't just for men willing to stand alone. It's for those brave enough to stand together." Faye leaned into him, her head fitting perfectly beneath his chin. "Two hearts are always stronger than one," she murmured. "Especially out here." As they stood together watching the sunset paint their land in gold, Sam Yates, no longer lonely, no longer alone, finally understood that the greatest frontier wasn't the wild land around them, but the journey two hearts take when they choose to face life's challenges as one.